Blood Bowl fanatics! Henry Snotson here, ready to bring you another thrilling episode of Tell Us Not. And boy, do we have a lot to cover. But first, let me start with a little joke. They say time waits for no one. But judging by some of these teams, I think it's been actively running away from them. Ha! Some squads are still fighting for a spot in the playoffs, and time is slipping through their fingers like a greased-up goblin. All right, enough jokes. Let's dive into the action. Group A is moving at lightning speed, and nothing proves that better than this showdown between the Elves of Aisha's Revenge and the Nautican Warriors of Deep Sea Lurkers. The Elves started sluggishly but quickly made up for it by brutally eliminating Cake, one of the team's crabs. That gulp you heard? That was the Lurkers' coach realizing he might need a backup plan. Fortunately, the medical team patched him up for the second half. Aisha's Revenge nearly secured their touchdown early, so they tried to milk the clock, which, as we all know, usually backfires. Sure enough, the Lurkers barely had any time left. But that was enough for a perfectly executed lizard toss play that left the Elves stunned as the game ended 1-1. The second half became a blistering sprint match, with both sides looking for any cracks in the opposition. Olivin slipped up, giving Aisha's Revenge a golden chance. But Serene was locked in a wrestling match with a group of feisty lizards, and the game ended in a draw. Never count out a lizard when there's a big, strong friend ready to throw them. A high-stakes battle at the top of Group A, the Sparkles, still recovering from their brutal encounter with the Telesnoobies, surprised the Supremes with an immediate, blistering attack. However, their plans were monkey-wrenched when the newly recruited orangutan Rocky intercepted the ball, tossing it straight back into his teammates' formation. The Simian Warriors thought they could get away with more questionable fouls, but this time, the ref wasn't feeling so generous. Like the previous match, the second half began at 1-1. The Sparkles struggled to use their usual hypnotic charm on the Supremes, so they pivoted to an alternate strategy, winning their hearts through their stomachs. A critical pass could have changed everything, but Marlon the Chimp had different plans. Using his grappling skills, he took down the ball carrier in dramatic fashion, forcing a fumble and sealing another 1-1 draw. If magic and beauty won't work, try snacks. Unless you're playing against a really determined chimp. No draws here, just pain. The Ogres were desperate for a win, and the Spartans were still reeling from their last few brutal encounters. Without much in the way of an inducement budget, the Bone Crunches brought in Bomber Dribblesnot, who immediately started terrorizing the opposition. The newly recruited gunner, Steven, also made quite an impression, though his decision to use his cannon as a club was questionable at best. The Spartans fought bravely, but under a relentless barrage of ogre fists, they dropped like flies. The fluffiest, most terrifying Yeti Fluffy tore through their armor like tissue paper. In the second half, the judges had one last chance after Keegan fumbled the ball with his oversized mitts, but he recovered just in time. The Ogres, trying to get creative, attempted to hand the ball to their Yeti, but let's just say that catching isn't Fluffy's strong suit. Final score, 1-0 for BC Bone Cruncha, but now they need the Spartans to win their next match for their own playoff hopes to stay alive. And that's I called a plot twist. Nothing says we believe in you like beating a team into the ground and then needing them to win later. Big surprise. The Telesnoobies' streak of pure, unfiltered carnage comes to an end at the hands of the Dust Goblins. And it wasn't like the imps were holding back. They even brought in Borak the Despoiler to add an extra layer of menace to their game plan. Despite their usual show of ruthless brutality, the Dobkins big guys held firm, while the little goblins scrambled to safety.
Ooh.
Leaving Sasari no choice, but dashing through the carnage to score before anyone could react. But it pays off. When players were setting up to start new drive, the refs finally took notice of Telesnoobies' additional equipment, handing out red cards like candies and sidelining several key players. One particularly gutsy imp chucked a bomb straight at Jamal the Bone Giant, banking on his legendary clumsiness. But to everyone's shock, Jamal caught it and threw it back. Only a last-second dump off from Wakey Wakey saved Borak from eating an explosive surprise. The steamroller and chainsaw made their predictable appearances, but even that wasn't enough to secure a win. Final score 1-1, and the Dust Goblins prove they're not to be underestimated. If Borak needs a bomb defusing class after this game, we wouldn't blame him. The Iron Wolves were thrilled at the idea of clashing with the ruthless and deadly elven witches. Finally, some elves who like to play rough. But instead of an intense brawl, the witches straight up ghosted them. Heartbroken and alone on the field, the Kurgan warriors begrudgingly accepted the walkover points, tossing aside bouquets of flowers they had brought in anticipation of a bloody and passionate battle. Turns out, the most brutal heartbreak isn't losing. It's being ignored entirely. Moranian's squad had been used to outpacing their opponents. But not this time. From the very start, the half-elves proved they could keep up with the kobolds, though handling the slippery ball was another matter. When the half-elves finally snatched possession, Moranian unleashed his favorite secret weapon, magic. A wizened old witch cursed Allevi, turning her into a frog, which was promptly squashed by a passing kobold. Fitting fate for an elf. But the trick backfired when Cobalt Chase got grabbed by the tail mid-play, failing to pass off the ball. Moments later, the half-elves celebrated their first touchdown. The kobolds scrambled to equalize, but a troglodyte named Grog tripped over an elf, ruining their last hope. The match ended with 2-0 win for an half-elves securing their spot in the playoffs. While Moranian now has to nervously watch the table because Defiance will claim a free win next round. And if Elves start bringing fly swatters to the next match, we'll know why. For weeks, fans had been eagerly anticipating the ultimate battle of the elements. The unyielding might of earth versus the raging fury of fire. Would the scorching flames of Weatherton Inclements melt through the rocky defenses of grim gemstones? Or would the stone warriors simply smother the fiery spirits into glowing embers? Turns out neither. The Weatherton Inclements never showed up, leaving the gemstones standing alone on the field like a pile of very confused boulders. The reason? Well, it seems the fire elementals may have gotten a little too excited the night before the match. Reports indicate that their celebrations, or possibly a very enthusiastic pre-game warm-up, ended with their entire headquarters engulfed in flames. With their training grounds reduced to a smoldering ruin, the Inclements had no choice but to forfeit, handing Grim Gemstones an effortless victory. Moral of the story? Maybe don't preheat the entire building before a big game. The final match of Round 6 brought us yet another explosive entry by none other than Cindy P. Whistle, once again hired by the murderous kangaroos. The Border Princes, however, were not ready for such a bombastic opening. Quite literally, realizing the danger too late, the princes launched a direct assault on the halfling baker. But in a last act of defiance, Cindy chose to detonate herself along with Rupert, taking the unfortunate Border Prince down in a puff of pastry and shrapnels. Still reeling from the shock, Defiance managed to regroup before the end of the first half. As many before them had learned, you never expect the flying kangaroo, and sure enough, a surprise blitz cost them possession. However, refusing to be outdone, the princes quickly recovered, firing off a pinpoint pass to Rahel, allowing them to equalize before halftime. The second half, despite its relentless tempo, saw neither team able to claim the win. However, by the time the final whistle blew, it was clear that the Border Princes left the pitch far more battered than their opponents. Turns out they had prepared for kangaroos, but severely underestimated the koalas. Bloodthirsty koalas. Lesson learned. The cute ones bite the hardest. And that's all, folks. In the next episode, we will see who will advance into the finals. Until then, take care, and remember, the Nuffle hates us all. See you later, alligator.
Stop me!